What made you break up with the person you thought you'd marry? Doesn't really fit here because I did marry him in the end, but in retrospect I should have broken it off before it got that far. He wasn't who I thought he was and I wasn't who he wanted me to be. He was depressed, obese and had huge self-worth issues and some trouble with alcohol abuse. The relationship ended up being more of a caretaker-patient thing, with him making me feel guilty when I left home for work, and spending spare time with someone else was unthinkable. Short term I figured he'd get better, but he refused therapy. He tried starting 4 studies but lost interest sooner with each of them. With this getting progressively worse for 9 years, in the end he had no diploma, no income, was heavier than ever, drinking daily and relying on me for everything. Leaving was difficult, but it was the best thing I could have done for him. He finally started taking responsibility, started therapy, and now he's financially independent, taking care of his body and doing all kinds of active things with friends. In the meantime I'm happily taken and feel a lot more free to pursue my goals and dreams with a partner who's also aiming for the stars. My friend is currently going through something very similar. She is pretty much just sticking around until the lease is up, then she is leaving him. I hope her story ends like yours. Both of us were alcoholics. I met him at age 22, he was 26. Love at first sight. It was immediately understood without even speaking of it that we were just going to be together now. And that was that for 2.5 years. I have still never met someone I have loved entirely as much as I loved him. And when I broke things off with him, I honestly think a piece of my soul died, because I have truly never been the same since. My mom and dad were both alcoholics and it fricked up my childhood. I had a drinking problem myself that I didn't understand yet. My drinking increased when we began dating because it seemed so normal to indulge more with him. The more I drank, the more neurotic and needy I became. The more he drank, the more he just faded away from the world. He always drank to the point of blacking out and I hated it. I would see his facial expression go kind of blank while we were out, and I'd know he was blacked out, like nothing there, dead behind the eyes. And I'd wonder where the guy I loved was. I'd tell him we needed to go home and he'd brush it off and refuse. He had to close the bar down no matter what. He'd just always get so freaking hammered. Seeing the man I loved really drunk would always trigger this really lonely and dark sadness inside me. I felt invisible like I did to my parents my whole childhood. And he drank like every day. He never slept at night so much as he actually just kind of passed out. I always felt like I was sleeping next to a ghost when he was passed out from drinking. I felt like I was dating him, the perfect person, and then also his twin, who had nothing to give and no life inside of him. It was just a shell of him. It broke my heart constantly. After some time of cyclical arguments, usually while both of us were drunk, I started to realize he didn't feel like he had an issue, and I wasn't sure he would ever face it. I wanted to face my issues. I wanted a better life and better mental health. He was not in favor of making changes. He had socialized with the same group of guys since he was 5, all of whom drank to blackouts regularly, and his dad was a big drinker. They were from a privileged, upper middle class kind of circle where binge drinking was just normal because they went to more expensive bars and only drank craft beers and whatnot. IDK how to explain it, but there was a disconnect there between us. There was no part of his life that didn't revolve around alcohol, and I knew if I didn't get away from that lifestyle, I was going to end up miserable or maybe even dead. I still fight for my sobriety every day. He just got married last month. I saw photos from the wedding, where he had a drink in his hand in every photo and the same blank, drunk expression I could never cope with. I wish him the best, and I still miss him every day. I freaking hate alcohol for all of the crap in life that it absolutely destroys. Sorry to hear this sad story. Wish you the best of luck in the future. Both of my parents are alcoholics. Although my mother still gets along pretty well, I still know how frustrating dealing with someone who's too drunk to function on the regular can be. This thread really gave me the kick up the butt I needed to sort my mental health and finances out. I'm dating the most incredible man for 4 years, but I see now how my depression and lack of financial control is affecting us. I feel we are headed for a breakup, but if I get myself on track we might have a chance. She wanted to go to Florida for the Disney college program. She is a Disney nerd. She was too scared she would lose me. I convinced her to do it because if she didn't, she would regret it forever and that no matter what happened I would still be here for her. 6 months and an engagement ring later she told me that while in Florida she realized she didn't love me like she thought she had. The ring is in a box in the back of a drawer in my dresser. Her worst fear came true. So did mine. Whoa, I can't believe how relevant this thread is to me right now. My dad just dropped me back off at my house from the hospital 45 minutes ago, so this literally just happened. His fiance was watching my son while he took me. The last 4 days, my fiance has decided to stay at her new co-worker's house either overnight or until well into the morning. I told her that's ridiculously not okay to do when you're engaged, even though she claims it was just stress relief playing video games with a new guy friend. We also have a 4-month-old son that I've been taking care of for the past 4 days she's been gone, and I've been very sick with what I thought was a stomach bug. Well, this morning I fainted, and she insisted I just get some rest and maybe go to urgent care if I don't get better. Then I lost my ability to keep any liquids down and was insistent that she take me to the hospital then go home and take care of our son. This was too much to ask though, as she'd already made plans to meet this guy again tonight. She walked to her work and left her family behind to go spend the night at his house. I told her that if she chooses to abandon her family to go spend time with another man, who I never accused her of cheating on me with despite the numerous red flags, then her family won't be waiting for her when she gets home. I involved someone in my family out of necessity, so my dad took me to the hospital and his fiance watched my son. My fiance's last text to me simply said I can't come home, so I guess I just lose everything. After multiple chest rays and an abdomen CT, it turns out I'm not sick, but the stress caused by my relationship started causing massive problems throughout my body. Oh, and apparently I have a kidney stone. I know it was petty, but when I got home I just sent her a picture of our son and told her that this was who she chose to give up on tonight. What the frick? I'm a new mom myself and I can't even imagine. This is really disturbing to me. She needs a serious wake-up call. I was raped while in the military. Fiance also military. I told him what happened and he went out, had sex with someone, filmed it, and showed me the film because I cheated on him, so he was making it even. I ran immediately. I was engaged to a guy I'd dated for 3 years and planning a destination wedding. He cheated with a mutual friend one night. His mom, who he lived with while we were apartment hunting, accidentally walked in on them in the middle of it while letting the dogs out. He didn't know his mom had seen, but his mom called me and told me what happened. He denied it when I confronted him, which made it worse. Called off the wedding and broke up, etc. Weirdly enough, he got married about 5 years later to someone else in the exact same destination wedding location, venue, package, colors I had always dreamed of and planned out for us. He must have kept my planning binder and just reused it or something. That was awesome of his mom for telling you. She ended her own life last October. It'll have been a year since she died in 6 days. Still breaks my heart. We were already engaged, but she was a very, very troubled woman. I kinda just shot this post out because I was so certain nobody would notice, and I needed to vent. Been breaking down a lot now that I'm approaching the worst day in my life, but it's good to know you're out there reached out like this. Thanks, everyone. We had been dating for over 2 years, and engaged for about 6 months. Then one night, she bit me twice. Then I slapped her once, and she called the cops. We were drunk of course, and got into an argument about something stupid, and I wanted to let it all go until the morning, when we could talk about it when we were sober. But she was doing that thing she had been doing for a while at that point, refusing to relent until she felt she won the argument. I was going to sleep at her apartment that night, but when she wouldn't stop arguing, I decided to get up and leave. As I was starting to put my pants on, she tackled me in a fit of rage. Then she bit my arm hard, so much so that she drew blood. I still have the scar. I squirmed away, but she grabbed my legs and then she bit me again, hard, this time on my butt cheek. I still have that scar too, only it's bigger. The second bite she wouldn't let go, gnashing on my butt like a dog with a chew toy. So I grabbed her hair and pulled, then slapped her. She was shocked that I would slap her. Shocked. She called the cops. They showed up. Saw all the blood and that I was the only one bleeding, then arrested her. I was actually kind of surprised by that, but they were reasonable individuals. I did not want to press charges. I was done with her and saw no need for them at that point. Turns out the town she lived in has a domestic violence law that compels the prosecutor to file charges without needing me to press charges. She took a deal that put a misdemeanor on her record versus felony battery and a year's probation. About 6 weeks after this incident, I met the woman who is now my wife. This November will be our 22nd wedding anniversary, and in all that time, she has never bitten me, and I have never slapped her. She was in love with my best friend, and they were both in denial about it. They were engaged a month after we broke up. He cheated and got another woman pregnant, then called me a few weeks later asking me to be the child's godmother because he knows I'm really good with kids. What the frick? Completely unable to manage money, spent every dollar he came across on gaming and weed and constantly put off paying important bills. Would dragged us both into bankruptcy if I would have stayed him. I'm glad for you. Financial abuse is a real thing and will never end if you stay in a relationship with someone who doesn't manage their money at all so they can spend it on partying. I moved across the world for him. He kept telling me one day I want to propose, or I can't wait for you to be my wife. The proposal never came, and I was having visa issues, so after a few years I gave up and moved back. Met my wife when she was here in the States on a J1 visa. I was only with her for about 4 months and knew she was the one. Her visa was expiring and my mom told me put a ring on her finger. We've been married 3 years this November and have a 13-month-old son. I wasn't going to allow her to move back to Europe. Ironically, we moved to Europe for a year and came back to the States. He was obsessed in making me speak better. He would control my food intake and make me exercise every day. Whenever I was out with him I have to wear heels, dress well, and he would point out what other girls were wearing and that I should try on. Putting makeup is a must even when I'm on a plane. I wasn't allowed to speak other language aside from English and not allowed to watch dramas. That is trash to him. My last straw was him asking me to consider to get a boobs job when I lost so much weight from all the exercise controlled diet. I realized I cannot live this way anymore and he will never be satisfied ever. Even though I still love him, but I was mentally drained and constantly felt that I was ugly and unworthy. We had been dating for 3 years, constantly talked about getting married and what our life will be like. He went back into the military and wouldn't commit to having a long distance relationship with me because it would be way too distracting when he's in the field and I pop up on his mind, and he didn't want to commit to a relationship while in the army, so we broke it off. The real kicker is that a couple months after being away in another state, he started dating a new girl who apparently lives in the same state as me. So, LOL. After 2 years of constantly forgiving him for cheating on me, it wasn't until I needed to be hospitalized that I realized he didn't love me. When I needed him the most he told me, "I'm sorry, I can't take you being in there. It makes me too sad. Call me when you get out." So when I did, I told him I just wanted to be friends, but I had nothing against him. Literally a day after I called him and told him that, he made FB official post dating some other girl. LOL. I'm married now and really happy in my relationship. I definitely dodged a bullet. I'm sorry, I can't take you being in there. It makes me too sad. Call me when you get out. Seriously, what a mother. I went through something similar. You dodged a bullet. Hope you're doing fine. We had been dating for 2 years, but had dated in high school 10 years before that. She had been married for a short time, but that all broke up right before we started dating. Anyways, she wouldn't invite me around to her parents' place ever, because they were very religious and didn't believe in divorce. After getting engaged, though, I felt like I ought to hurry up and clear the water with them. I had known them in high school, though they had never liked me, and I remembered her dad's mobile number, so I called him. Long story short, she was still married to her husband. She had lied about getting divorced and I was her side chick. Though she spent so much time with me, I don't believe they could have had a very happy marriage. I made her give me the ring back. Darling, that really sucks. I'm sorry you had to go through that. The relationship died. We had very different ideas of what life should be like. For example, He had said he'd break up with me if I didn't get a college education. He also gave me ultimatums, twice, about moving with him to a small town both times. At the second time, I let him carry out the ultimatum. Whoa, no pressure whatsoever. Found credit card statement on the floor once, just before a family holiday. Thousands in debt that he'd never told me about. I'd been paying the rent entirely by myself in a job I hated, and I was too young and naive, 23, to realize he wasn't an honest man. That was it. Same for me, except her mom had been paying her credit card for years and basically told me that her daughter was $150,000 plus in debt to her and that would be our debt soon. She never told me about it. Yikes. She actually was quite the rude person and believed anyone who told her that acting this way is unacceptable is someone trying to control her. She would always deflect and couldn't just accept that people don't like blunt and rude but people in general. My mom was dying. It was my last Thanksgiving with her. Without discussing it with me first, he had his mom buy him plane tickets to spend Thanksgiving with his parents and asked if I wanted to go with him. I am not missing the last Thanksgiving I can ever spend with my mom. We will have our whole lives to spend Thanksgiving with your family after this. You're leaving me to face this one alone, or to abandon my mother on her last Thanksgiving? It was suddenly very clear, being happy to cancel wedding plans to do it later, and many other things, that he didn't want to be in a relationship with me, but wouldn't break up with me, because my mom was dying, and he was too nice a guy to dump his fiancée whose mom was dying. To his credit, we remained close friends, and he continued to be there as my best friend and emotional support through her death, and some months following. Although it was 8 years ago, we still text a few times a year, and catch up on how our families are doing. Your ability to not resent him and see things from his perspective is one of the wisest and most mature displays of adult level understanding I've ever seen. Read. We moved in together too young, and tried to be adults too fast. I should have known things were not going to work out when he tried to convince me to buy a house with him at 19, in Southern California, on 2 retail employees' wages. Like, what? We were high school sweethearts. He was smart and ambitious, but he also loved to spend money, and worked insane hours to try to make up the deficit. After we moved in together, his work schedule changed, so I was working morning shifts, and would literally pass him in the driveway as he left for his night shifts. There would be several days in a row where we wouldn't see each other, and when we did see each other we were too broke to do anything fun. We went on a trip with his family after a big fight, where I begged him to not ask me to marry him. I told him I wasn't sure how I felt anymore. I was unhappy. He seemed unhappy. I wasn't stupid. I knew why he suddenly wanted to know my ring size. I hadn't been happy for months, and had become a workaholic to try to keep up with the expenses. I wanted to see if the vacation would bring a spark back into our relationship. Then maybe we could work ourselves back into normalcy. He didn't listen, and asked me to marry him in front of his entire family and surrounded by strangers, hundreds of miles away from home. I was 21, and had no idea how to say no. Our engagement lasted 9 days, because that's all I could stomach while thinking about spending my life with someone I wasn't in love with. I have no idea what he's up to now, but I found my soulmate, so I'm peachy keen. I begged him to not ask me to marry him. I see where this is heading. Asked me to marry him in front of his entire family. I don't understand how these types of people's minds work. She was already married. We worked together a job you couldn't wear rings. She hid it very well. I was the other guy. Found out when I proposed and had to tell me she's married. After 4 years of relationship, her parents couldn't come into terms with my religion and caste. They completely opposed our marriage. The girl couldn't sacrifice her parents' relationship, and so she sacrificed me for them. Welcome to 21st century India. After over 2 years of marriage, his family can't accept that I exist. He's Arab. I'm not, so we may end soon. People say it gets better, or they say it doesn't change. Regardless, we will never be enough for him to truly force the issue. Being sacrificed sucks. So sorry. I was extremely young and in puppy love. A condition to me even dating him that he was no longer to use drugs. I knew he was drug user previously and he had asked me out many times during that period, in which I declined, until he was clean and sober. Eventually he was so determined to have me, he got clean. Later on I found out once he got comfortable with our relationship he was using behind my back, among other things. He, for some unbeknown reason to me, told his entire family I was pregnant. I was not pregnant, never have been. I never lied to him about being pregnant either, which turned my life upside down. It didn't end well, I broke it off. Now he's married with 4 kids. What a crappy lie. The family is going to figure out in half a year or less you're not pregnant. As I type I just realized he probably was manipulating them for the eventual miscarriage sympathy. Every time we fought she would throw her engagement ring somewhere, make me get it, then make me plead with her to put it back on. Even for very small disagreements and even in public. That was the final straw. It was very fricked up feeling begging somebody to be with me all the time. It gave me huge insecurity issues. That was on top of the fact she began to call me names and hit me a lot. It all started after we got engaged for some reason. Things were so perfect but as soon as she got that ring everything changed. Suddenly she what I mentioned along with calling me a loser, piece of crap, and ugly a lot. TBH I'm pretty sure he lost his mind. He was constantly accusing me of cheating, going through my phone and emails, jumping down my throat if I ran late at work, calling my work when he found something he felt was incriminating to berate me and threaten to throw me out. He took texts and emails he found between me and another guy, whom I was dating during a 9-month period where we'd broken up, and used that to berate me and call me a W because even though we were broken up we still meant something to each other and I shouldn't have done it. He was so cruel. He'd put me down and make me cry, then mock me for it. Anytime I tried to defend myself he'd tell me he was the only thing standing between me and standing in line at the Salvation Army and to be careful how I spoke to him. I was on my knees at one point, begging and crying for him not to leave me. I loved that man like a senseless fool. Everything kind of blew up when I went to the beach for a day with a friend and he basically accused me of slutting my way up and down the coast. It was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. I couldn't do it anymore. I had reached the event horizon for my tolerance of emotional manipulation and abuse. Huge argument ensued. We broke up. I got home and he'd already packed my crap and I left right then. I was homeless for a bit, but I had my dignity and self-respect back. He was probably cheating. It's common for people when they cheat to deflect and try to make it seem like it is the other person in the wrong. She cheated on me, though. Going through that made me learn a lot about myself and readjust my standards. So in an odd way, I'm thankful that happened. I found out the guy was no longer working when I called to see why his paychecks hadn't come in. I handled the finances for us, and he kept saying his boss would be sending it. It turned out he quit, and instead of telling me, spent the next few weeks pretending to work. Instead he started going to strip clubs on what little money he had hoarded. When I went to break it off with him, he punched his hand through the wall and lost his mind. By the time he finally calmed down, he had turned strangely morose. He looked at me and asked if we could have sex one last time. My response, number. Him after a long pause, sifting through his pockets and holding out a dollar bill. I'll pay you $1 to sleep with me. It's all I have left. Needless to say, he left with $1 in his pocket and no final goodbye. That's strangely depressing on both ends. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.